My name is Katie. I am a grateful believer in Jesus Christ, overcoming low self-worth, divorce, abortion, anorexia, body image, trust, and control issues. I grew up in Spanaway. Oh, hi.
Hi, Katie.
Sorry. There's a timer. I feel like I'm... Okay. I grew up in Spanaway with two very loving parents and my older brother. Growing up, I was a Girl Scout. My dad was my coach, and I was the editor of the school newspaper. I knew a little bit about everyone, but only few were truly close to me. I was the awkward child with pink glasses. I was constantly picked on by my brother and his friends, but I looked up to them. Wanting to be accepted only pushed me to do what they wanted, and I could be told not to tell. They had the sex club in a fort in our backyard. I believe I was 6, and they would have been about 10. I don't have a complete recollection or answers of how long this happened, but I do recall my brother's friends that took advantage of me. In elementary school, I had a friend who was very curious. I remember we had sleepovers in her home. We were about 10 at the time. Once the doors were shut, she would touch me inappropriately. I didn't like it, but knew nothing of speaking up and saying no. My desire to be cool was satisfied with the sacrifices of my mind and my body. This went on for about a year, until I began to make other friends, and eventually her mom moved them to a different school. In junior high, I was kissed by my first boyfriend. This boy eventually stopped talking to me. He started to go out with my best friend. This crushed me. I felt like I was worth nothing, not important to the boy or to my best friend. This was my first experience with rejection. I went ice skating a lot. One night, while I was sleeping over at my best friend's house, she convinced her parents to let us sleep in the barn loft. I didn't know that she had invited 2 of the guys she was talking to at the rink that night to come over. When they got there, it was a surprise to me. However, to fit in, I didn't speak up, even though I knew it was wrong. The boys wanted to play strip poker. It was not long after we started playing that her mom and dad came to check on us. Come to find out, they were both 20 years old and in the military. I was 14, she was 13. The strip poker somehow became the fault of my brother for not teaching me how to play poker. It wasn't the lack of my poker skills. It was the lack of self-control displayed by 2 grown men and 2 little girls who let themselves get into a situation and didn't have the confidence to say no. This happened in 8th grade. Later that year, I found out the same friend of mine was intimate with my brother. I felt betrayed beyond measure. First she took my boyfriend, now she took my brother. Again, God shifted my friends. I was able to grow and foster my first real friendships full of life and no drama. These 2 women and I are still friends. They both showed me what it would have been like to have sisters, and they're here today, Chrissy and Courtney. In school, I knew just about everybody. I was enough to be accepted into every circle, the nerds, the jocks, the cheerleaders, you name it, I knew them all, but never let anyone too close. My parents had told me that I needed to start college at a community college that was in the state. I wanted to get away, so I chose Spokane. It fit the bill. Community college, check. In the state, check. I loved my life in Spokane. I played soccer, met new friends, and at 19, I went on my first real date with a guy that picked me up. He actually paid for dinner, and it was nice. That same night, it was also my first intimate experience. I pretended it wasn't my first time, as I had learned, offering your body is what pleases people. After that first time, I couldn't face him anymore. I wouldn't return his call. I wanted nothing to do with it. Then a few months later, I met my first love, Lance. In an economics class that spring, we were together constantly. 5 months later, on my 20th birthday, he asked me to marry him, and I said yes. In October, we visited my parents, and it hit me. I couldn't marry Lance. He was controlling, and we were both far too young. We were definitely not ready to get married. My parents came to my rescue. Lance flew home to Spokane that night, heartbroken with the engagement ring he had given me 1 month prior. I went back to Spokane the following weekend to gather all of my things to move back to Spanaway. In December, I was at dinner with a friend when I realized my pants were too tight for comfort. That evening, I took a pregnancy test, and it was positive. I had already thrown myself into a new relationship to get over Lance. We had been together for 1 month, and he told me he wouldn't stick around if I had someone else's baby. The next day, I was at the clinic, ready to take care of the situation, as my new boyfriend said to. The reality hit me when the ultrasound confirmed I was 19 weeks along. I was in my second term of pregnancy. I had no time to make sure I was making the right decision for me. If I reached 20 weeks, they would not perform an abortion. I was numb through this, always going with what others told me to do. As I was so far along, it was a 2-day procedure. I went through the minimal counseling that they required, then was taken to the room where they would do the first step of the procedure. Laying on the table, I felt trapped, with no other option but to follow through. I felt like it was too late to say stop, and I didn't listen to my heart that was screaming, "Don't do this." I made the choice and followed the advice of man. I didn't follow God's will. I was sent home that night, scheduled to return the next morning. That evening, I was alone, didn't sleep much at all. When I did, I dreamt of killing myself. What was the point? Who could ever love me after what I had done? I asked the doctor in the morning if I could change my mind. I was told no, it was too late, the baby was gone. December 10th, 1999, they took my baby from me. I do not know if it was a boy or girl. I told them not to tell me, as I thought knowing would make it more real. We continued to date 2 more years. During this time, I experienced the first boyfriend who cheated on me. I walked in on him and a coworker of mine while they thought I was at work. I left and moved in with my brother and his wife. With all this stress, I was diagnosed with mono. I don't know why, but my doctor gave me many prescription pain pills to numb the pain. It numbed way more than the physical pain. It was here that I introduced myself to self-medication. I was able to curb my anxiety by popping a pill. In this season of my life, I was broken. I had many partners. I used these men to boost my self-esteem. I had learned so early in life that acceptance and love is shown through intimacy. I was no longer that awkward little girl in glasses with braces. I had learned how to make my looks stand out and used my body to get who I wanted. This destructive path led me to more brokenness. August of 2002 finally came, and this is where I ran into Josh. We had known each other briefly in high school. In 2003, I had Isaac, our first son. Things were great, and we were learning how to be a family together. In 2006, we were pregnant with Jacob. It was a high-risk pregnancy that I didn't take seriously. One evening, when I was 6 months along, I started to bleed heavily. Immediately, we headed to the hospital where I was told I had the chance of losing the baby and also my own life. They held me hostage at the hospital for over a month on bed rest. Not allowed to get out of bed the first week. My husband came to visit me about 10 times, with the longest visit being 1 hour. I never felt so alone. I am thankful that my aunt made me a priority and was there nearly every other day. My parents were there as often as they could manage. My brother is an EMT and is often at the hospital. I remember waking up a few nights with him sleeping on the couch, napping, and recall the nurses telling me that some guy keeps asking how I was doing. Those visits from my family mean the world to me. But still lingering in the back of my head is why wasn't my husband there for me? They decided to deliver Jacob as soon as his lungs developed long enough to survive. I was scheduled for a C-section and he was delivered at 8 months. Throughout our relationship, I was the source of most all of our income. My husband was spending money without abandon while I was in the hospital. He chose to stop paying our mortgage and bought an Xbox to keep himself busy. Subsequently, with the decrease of my income and his lack of discipline with our finances, we lost our house April 2010. Isaac was 4 and Jacob was just 1. To top it off, that July, my husband's vehicle was repossessed for non-payment. He had very little left to pay, and it was the only responsibility he had financially. With his lack of support spiritually, emotionally, and now financially, I needed to take a break. My original intent was a weekend away at my parents', but that wasn't allowed. He made it clear, if I wasn't home, we were done. So I chose to be done and left August 2008. A few weeks after I left, I realized that I was pregnant. What I have constantly told myself through this, there are no unplanned children, only unaware parents. During the divorce, I was constantly beaten down by my husband's negativity. I was called a slew of horrible names. I had never once strayed in our relationship or our marriage. His hurt turned into hatred. He threatened to kill me multiple times. He told me the day before I delivered our youngest child, David, that I was too fat and nobody would ever love a single mom with 3 kids. Him telling me, you can't even keep your husband happy, has stayed with me in a huge way. After I had David and the divorce papers were signed, I resigned from my job and went back to school. I became obsessed with school and going to the gym. I had to get back into shape. Who would love me if I was fat? I began skipping meals, starting my day with a cup of coffee and a diet pill. I skipped lunch, and most often, instead of dinner, I would drink a protein shake and take another diet pill. I got very good at fake eating. I would only eat in front of people if I absolutely had to. Usually I would lie and say I grabbed something to eat. I was in the gym 6 days a week for 2 hours going after my goal weight. It took me about a month to go from 150 to 116. That's 35 pounds in 30 days. I knew it was wrong and how devastated my mom would be if she found out. It would crush her. She lost her friend to diet pills in the 90s. Still, my desire to be thin overrode making a good decision. Since my divorce, I have dated quite a few men. I have been in and out of a number of relationships trying to find a man to fill the void in my heart. I have misused my mind, body, and soul, and I have hurt others, all while trying to validate myself. In 2011, I dated a man that I met online. We did life together. We had a home church, our children were comfortable, we attended family trips together, and we talked about a future. The woman I walked in on him with, he also met online. I was determined to overcome the rejection that I felt from this newly failed relationship. I thought if I was skinny enough and pretty enough, he would have been the man that I needed. It was only my desire to make it work that made it last over a year. It had never occurred to me that he never was the man that I needed. I immediately jumped back into the gym, limited my eating, and dropped 15 pounds. The gym kept me busy and focused on my #1 goal, to be thinner. I was not healthy, but I was determined to run what had happened, and the gym helped me run. Soon after this, I began to focus on finding a new church for my boys and me to attend, and started the process of buying a new house. In February 2012, we moved into our first house. And I finally felt like I was providing a loving and stable environment for my boys. This is a huge victory for us. My career in design has proven to be a good choice, and my hard work continues to support us. March 2012, I was back to online dating and met a man that went to Champion Center. I went to Easter service where I recommitted my life to Christ. We dated, and it ended after a few months. It had started to go down the path of serious, but I never could see it through. Slowly, the boys and I became more and more integrated into the culture of Champion Center. By the end of summer, I was serving in the Sunshine Room, which is our children's ministry. Oh, aren't they handsome? In August 2012, my oldest Isaac was baptized. Then, finally, in February 2013, just 10 months after my one day, I attended my first day of Celebrate Recovery. This was after many prompts from many people close to me. I was finally ready. My first night was the testimony of Pastor Mekon Carter. The reality hit me. We're all broken, and we all mess up, and that is okay. 2 weeks later, I was back for more, and it was Kay's testimony that pushed me into my recovery. Her challenge was, look back to your younger self. One thing it's hard to read through tears. One thing that you could tell them, can you think of what it would be? By the word of the Lamb and the blood of your testimony, I had a victory. Thank you, Kay. Woo. That was the first night I went to group. I was literally grabbed by this bubbly Asian girl, Kim. She linked arms with me and asked, "Where are you going?" I had no clue and wondered why she was so happy. She took me exactly where I needed to be. First night in group, Whitney asked how we liked the testimony. In discussing the testimony, I kept going back to my early days where my brother's friends took advantage of me. If I could talk to my younger self, I would tell on them, don't keep quiet. It was here when I made the realization that my seeking validation in men was hurting me. Principle 3 says, we made a decision to turn our lives and our wills over to the care of God. The next week, I received my one-day coin. I had made the decision to reclaim my purity and wait to be intimate until I was married. Romans 12:1. Therefore, I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. In April, just a few months after starting at CR, I felt the calling to be baptized and was baptized on Easter. There's me. In July of 2013, I was feeling very lonely. I tried internet dating again and had another bad experience with a man who was very pushy. I surrendered and told God I'm done searching. A few days later, on a ladies' night out, a handsome, tall man named Rusty showed interest in me. The groups mingled and we talked until late into the evening. During our conversation, we both realized we attended Champion Center. Wow. It felt like a God connection. I fell fast for him. We shared the same values. Eventually, he shared some of his story and assured me he was on a healthy place in his own recovery. The flags began to surface mid-September. I just didn't want to see them. There were a number of times that I had questions that should have had clear answers, but his answers simply didn't add up. Finally, I found drugs in my home, which pushed me to finally seek out the entire truth. I made the decision to tell him that we could not date. When I confronted him, he was very cold and it felt like he was a completely different person. All of my redeemed sisters and friends circled around me and kept me safe. They checked in with me constantly that first week, holding me accountable. Because of CR and step studies, I knew what steps I needed and what my recovery could look like. I needed to grieve and move past the hurt of the lost relationship by seeking God, not men. Right. The first week I did great. I didn't seek out any attention because I had accountability. Following weekend, my cousin and I took my boys to Oregon for the day. On this trip I relapsed, but I didn't see it at the time. I convinced myself I was just seeing what was out there. I opened an account online and was chatting for a week with a few different guys, and then it hit me. This isn't what I need. I closed down the account and told the men that I'm not in the right mindset and offered my apologies. I was not ready to date. On Thanksgiving, I left a letter for Rusty, offering my friendship and forgiving him for failing. Before he left for Michigan, we talked twice. The first time we met, I was very angry and still didn't understand. I felt like he threw away a happy future for drugs. Why would you do that? Nothing he could say would change how much his actions made my heart break. I began to see that my ways of coping with pain and anxiety were somewhat similar to his. The day before he was leaving, the sadness set in. I had realized he was going to be gone from our day-to-day life, and he'd be physically removed. I would no longer be able to see him. That evening, Rusty came by and we talked for a few hours. I found peace in knowing that he was going after his recovery for himself. When he left the house, the burden of angry feelings had lifted. Principle 9 says, we make direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. My openness had allowed us the opportunity to make amends with each other. Celebrate recovery is where the walls come crumbling down. I know that every second the enemy is ready and waiting, but he cannot have me, and he doesn't deserve any of you. I have learned more compassion, love, and kindness from my children. As my son Jacob says, you don't have to be a grown-up to tell the enemy what to do. Just tell him no. God will listen. God continues to show up in my life. I am excited for this new season to see the work God is doing through me. I know that he has many good things in store, and one of those is the husband he has specially designed just for me. I know that no human can take the place of God, but that does not mean we are meant to do life alone. Right now I am focusing on becoming the woman God intended me to be. With the work that I have done, I am realizing that what others do to me are definitions of their character, not mine. I truly believe that through all the struggles, God is shaping me to be a voice. I leave you with this. Be kind in what you say. Your words have the power to lift up or tear down. Be mindful of what side of somebody's testimony your words will fall. Do you want to be on the side riddled with hurt and pain, or on the side that helps someone feel uplifted, full of life, and worthy of God's love? If you could take any of your own words back, what would they be, and who would benefit from that? I urge you to go to them and make amends. Thank you.